Good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's meetings. This is a meeting of the Governance Committee of the U of L Board of Trustees and Research Foundation. I will now call the roll. Benita Black, here. Scott Brinkman,
Here.
Mary Nixon,
Here.
Jim Rogers,
Here.
Krista Wallace-Boas.
Here.
Thank you. Having determined a quorum present, I would like to call this meeting to order. One reminder before we jump into the business of today's meeting, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes for the April 23rd meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor signify aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstention? The motion carries and the minutes stand approved. Our next item of business is the election of officers and elect the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees. After consultation with board members, the committee proposes the following slate. Chair Mary Nixon, Vice Chair Raymond Burse, Treasurer Diane Medley, Secretary Benita Black, Assistant Secretary Jake Beamer. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Thank you. Additionally, the committee proposes the following membership for the Executive Committee. Mary Nixon, Chair, Raymond Burse, Diane Medley, Benita Black, Jim Rogers, at-large member, and Krista Wallace-Boas, faculty representative. May I have a motion to approve the slate of officers and the Executive Committee as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Our last item of business today is the approval of the revised bylaws for the Board of Trustees. This is a housekeeping matter. It is best practice and good governance to exclude constituency trustees on the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee. The board will consider a new audit committee charter later today, and by revising the bylaws to include language that requires all committee members to be independent of the institution will align both documents. Are there any questions on this change to the bylaws? Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the revised bylaws as listed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any opposition? Any abstention? All in favor signify aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. This particular item will be voted on with a voice vote, roll call vote in the board meeting. Having no other business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
May I have
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify aye.
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 The meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Benita. We
Thank
are
you.
ready to start the Research Foundation. So Jim, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Jake. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining this virtual meeting of the U of L Research Foundation Board of Directors. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I will now call the roll. Jim Rogers, here. Benita Black.
Here. Here.
Scott Brinkman.
Here.
Randy Bufford.
Here.
Raymond Burse.
Here.
John Chilton.
Here.
Sabrina Collins.
Here.
Sandra Frazier.
Here.
Diane Medley.
Here.
Mary Nixon.
Here.
John Smith.
Here.
Krista Wallace-Boas.
Here.
Ron Wright.
Right here.
Having determined a quorum is present, I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome Sabrina to her first Research Foundation board meeting. Sabrina is the current student body president and will be joining us and the Board of Trustees this year. Sabrina, is there anything you'd like to say this morning?
No, I'm just excited to work with you all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sabrina. We're all very excited to work with you in your efforts to make U of L a great place to learn, work, and invest for our students and soon-to-be alumni. As chair, it's my responsibility to remind all members of the board of the responsibility to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest. Each member has received the agenda and related information for this Board of Directors meeting. If any board member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matter coming before the Board of Directors at this meeting, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict at this time. Hearing none, we'll move forward. Our only item of business today is the approval of a research agreement with Norton's for pediatrics. As you may recall, the executive committee tabled this item from its June 25th, 2020 meeting, requesting more time to review the agreement. Now that we've had time to review it, are there any additional questions you may have at this time? Hearing none, Tom Hoy, is there any new or additional information to share?
No, sir. No changes since we met last.
Thank you, Tom. We have a motion to approve the research agreement with Norton as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? The motion carries. Having no other business to come before the board, may I have a motion?
Jim, I'm sorry, this is Jake Beamer. Could we also approve the minutes from the April 23rd meeting? I'm sorry, I may have left that off the script.
Okay, that's fine. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Second.
Thank you. Any abstentions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. Thank you, Jake. Having no other business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
All in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Jim. And we are ready to start the Board of Trustees meeting. Mary, whenever you're ready.
I am ready. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, Sabrina, welcome. Thank you all for joining us for the annual meeting of the University of Louisville Board of Trustees. Having determined a quorum present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. As chair, not to repeat Jim Rogers, but I must, it is my responsibility to remind all members of the board of their responsibility to avoid conflicts of interest and any appearances of conflict of interest. Each member has received the agenda and related information for this Board of Trustees meeting. If any board member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matter coming before the board today, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict at this time. Hearing none, we will move on to the first item of business, which is the approval of the consent agenda as listed. Please call out if there is any item you'd like to discuss individually. All right, hearing no objections, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries. Our next item is the report of the Governance, Trusteeship, and Nominating Committee. Anita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. The committee met prior to the Research Foundation Board and approved a slate of officers and executive and committee membership for 2020-2021. The Governance Committee also approved revised bylaws for the board, which require a roll call vote. At this time, the committee moves both items for approval. And do I need to repeat the candidates for office or anything? If anybody needs that, I can do that. It's up to you, Mary.
I think probably everybody's okay. If everybody's not, speak up. Okay, so the committee has moved the election of officers and executive committee. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? I will now call the roll. Please signify in the affirmative or negative. Benita Black,
Aye.
Scott Brinkman,
Aye.
Randy Buckford,
Aye.
Raymond Burse,
Aye.
John Chilton,
Aye.
Sabrina Collins,
Aye.
Sandra Frazier,
Aye.
Diane Medley,
Aye.
Mary Nixon, aye. Jim Rogers,
Aye.
John Smith,
Aye.
Krista Wallace Boaz,
Aye.
Ron Wright.
Aye.
The ayes have it and the motion stands approved. Our next item is the approval of an amendment to the university's 403B retirement plan. Mr. Durbin, assume you're here. Would you brief the board on this recommendation?
Yes, I certainly will. And Tom Hoy, I would ask that you join in when if I miss something, but as part of the budget reduction program for the remainder of FY20, we had to reduce the retirement plan benefits to zero in terms of the dollar value or the percentage that the institution was funding as part of the mandatory piece, which was normally 7.5%, and then another 2.5% optional. So those were taken down through a board motion to zero for the months of May, June, and July. As part of the budget that the board recently approved for FY21, we were able to partially restore part of those to 2.5% base contribution and 2.5% optional match for the period through December 31. And at that point, as we look at the financial position of the university, we're going to reevaluate what course we take from there on. Any questions or?
Yeah, Tom, anything you want to add?
I would just add that the prior provision for the 7.5% and the 2.5% match remains in the plan and will go back into effect in January unless there is some further amendment. So this is only a temporary adjustment, just as the earlier reduction was a temporary reduction. This step of reinstating a portion of it is also temporary and would expire at the end of the calendar year.
Okay, so thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions from any of the trustees?
This is John Chilton. I have one, and that is how it applies to the month of July. I think that it was taken down to zero for June and July. Are we increasing effective July 1?
No, it's August 1.
August 1.
Some of that it was part of the zero was part of the $39 million plan from last year, and some of it fell into July. But this partial restoration takes effect August 1.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions for Dan or Tom? If not, may I have a motion to approve the plan amendment as listed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Our next item of business is the approval of a revised charter for the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee. This charter has not been revised since 2012, so it's appropriate that it be updated to reflect both the current board membership as well as audit expectation. As noted when the board approved the revised bylaws earlier, The charter also includes language to ensure that committee members are independent of the institution. The charter's been vetted by the Director of Audit Services, the Vice President for Risk Management, and the Audit Committee Chair. Sandy, Russell, or Jim Rogers, do either of you have anything to add?
No, I don't, not at this time.
Jim?
No, I have no.
All right. If not, may I have a motion to approve the revised Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee Charter?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Our next item is the approval of the research agreement with Norton for pediatrics. As you remember, we had this on the agenda for the executive committee meeting last month, and it was tabled. So people would have more time to review the agreement. So I would ask now if there are any questions that anybody has at this time. Tom, is there anything else, since it's been a while since this was provided to us, that's new or additional?
No, ma'am. Everything is, there have been no changes in the document since it was presented last month.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So if there are no questions, may I have a motion to approve the research agreement with Norton as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries. Our next item is the approval of the waiver regarding the University of Louisville Foundation Chair. And as you may recall, and some of you wouldn't have been around, members of the board at the time, the Board of Trustees waived the requirement back in 2018 that the foundation chair be a member of the Board of Trustees, which allowed Earl Reed, who's a community member of the foundation board, to become its chair. So the resolution presented today would again waive that requirement to allow Earl to continue to serve as the chair until at least the 2022 annual meeting of the foundation board. Are there any questions? Tom, anything you'd want to add?
No, I think you covered it.
All right. There's no questions. May I have a motion to approve the waiver as presented?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Any
Aye.
abstention? Or opposition, first, please. Any abstention? The motion carries. The next item is the approval of a revised Student Code of Rights and Responsibilities. Beth Boehm and Sabrina Collins, would you like to provide the context for this change?
Sure. So in spring, you'll remember before we went into a remote way of working, we had an incident on campus where a student distributed literature that was perceived to be an anti-gay literature in a classroom where a class on LGBTQ was being offered. In response, the campus put together, or I actually called together a committee. It was very diverse. It includes, it was pretty evenly split between faculty, staff, and students. It was chaired by Dean Paul DeMarco, who is the dean of the grad school, and Meg Hancock, who is a associate dean in the College of Education, and also chair of, or she was chair of the sports administration and health program. And so that committee worked from about, we charged them at the end of February, and they worked through June, putting together some changes to our Code of Rights and Responsibility for students. mostly what they did, and I have to say, it was the most diverse group I've ever been able to put together. They represented both very liberal views, very conservative views about free speech. They represented, as I said, staff, students, and faculty, and also about a third of the, or well, 5 of the members were underrepresented groups, 4 Black faculty, staff, and students, and 1 Native American faculty member, all who had a strong interest in this. I will say that 75 people volunteered to be on this committee when I sent out a call and said, if you are interested in helping us fix this, volunteer. And so 75 people volunteered. That's pretty extraordinary. And what they decided to do was they set the Student Code of Rights and Responsibilities in the context of our Cardinal Code, the Cardinal Principles that Neely has outlined for us. And so they created a new preamble. And then they also were charged by me with reviewing our current Code of Conduct, our current Code of Rights and Responsibilities for Students, along with the Kentucky Campus Free Speech Act that was passed in 2019, all right, to make sure that we were not doing anything that was out of step with that policy. Most of all, they felt that the policy, the rights and responsibilities, was in line. The major change they made was to declare a classroom a space where no one could distribute literature who was not a member of that class or a sanctioned university group. All right. So that would have prevented the student from having gone to the class and distributing literature in a classroom. It would not have prevented the student from standing outside the building and handing out that same literature. So students do have rights to distribute literature. It's just that we are saying that the classroom's not the place where that should take place. And that's the major change in this policy. It was reviewed by the committee. It was given to me. It was reviewed by Dean Martis and me to make sure that everything was kind of written right and wouldn't get us in any kind of legal trouble. We had legal counsel also on the committee that reviewed it, and we had faculty and staff senators on that committee, and then Sabrina's group reviewed it and approved it as well. And since the students are most impacted by the Code of Student Rights and Responsibilities, that was an important endorsement. So we are now ready to bring it to you and ask you to approve those changes that we made and to approve the new preamble, which sets it in terms of the cardinal principles. Are there questions?
Beth, I just had one comment. We had defined in previously, when I read through the non-read version, certain terms. And since you're wanting to make this new space of instructional area, classroom, it's kind of a very broad, building oriented. Did you give any thought to making that a more defined so it wouldn't be subject to any non-legal interpretation because it's not a defined area? And if you're okay with what you have, I'm fine with it. But as I look at this, somebody on challenging a free speech may look at it and say, well, it's not given the same weight as some of the other legally defined terms and, kind of the context of that. So I understand what you're trying to achieve. I just want to make it as bulletproof as possible.
You know what, I will defer. I don't know that the committee discussed that. There was legal counsel on the committee, and I don't know if Tom had I know Tom has reviewed this, but I don't know if you had an opportunity to think about the way. So you're asking whether the classroom is too loosely defined? Or what constitutes a classroom is too loosely defined?
Yeah, it's really when you look at section D and 7, in light of designation of classrooms, laboratories, and other. I mean, I just thought maybe if we were tightening up that definition, whether that mattered or not, just in comparison to the others. Again, if you're happy with it, I'm happy with it.
I didn't really see that problem, Randy, only in the sense that we wanted to make sure it didn't cover the whole building, that it was confined to the particular instructional space and for that course, and that occurs in some different types of instructional spaces, classrooms, labs. So I hadn't looked at it in that way, but let me take a look at it, and if we think we need a change to it, we can bring it back. But I'd probably want to go ahead and get it approved today, and then we'll see if we need to tinker with it if there are problems that come up.
And we do use a reservation system where every classroom space is identified and logged in that reservation system. So that would help in terms of, you know, what we are communicating and how we define that, at least institutionally. Whether or not we need to define that more for others that are reviewing the policy could be open for consideration. But we do have a place where we're identifying what are our classroom and laboratory and instructional spaces.
And I wouldn't want to stand in the way of getting this approved either. I think it's a needed thing that has to happen. It would be just more technical changes.
All right, so thank you, Beth and Sabrina, for getting this work done. And thank you, Randy, for your thoughtful question, and Tom and Dr. Martis for your thoughtful answers. So sounds like we're ready to move forward. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the revised Student Code of Rights and Responsibilities as listed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Any abstention? Motion carries.
Hey, Mary,
I'm sorry?
Mary, this is John. Can I just take a second? I was on that committee just to recognize the leadership of Paul and Meg. They did an outstanding job with the group, and I just wanted to put that out there. It was really, like Beth had mentioned earlier, it was a very diverse committee. It represented a lot of different views. They did an excellent job of keeping things focused and constructive.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, they did a wonderful job. And they also said it was one of the most enjoyable service assignments they had, even though it was difficult.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was quite interesting. But thank you. And we are on to our next item of business, which is the report of the president. Neely, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mary. My report today, I thought I would focus on 3 areas. First, to give you an update on how the University of Louisville is continuing to build a very, very strong culture of student-centric instruction, co-curricular activities, really putting the student at the center of what we are trying to do. The second part is a quick update on the very large undertaking we all had last year of UFL Health. And finally, I would like to present my goals for myself and for my team for FY21. On the first item, I wanted to showcase to you how faculty are leading the charge. Beth Boehm and I, after the strategic plan, have said one of the most important things to do is to make this a great place to learn. UFL has always had a strong history, I believe. I've seen it, of faculty caring about students. But recently, I had the opportunity in our faculty senate meeting to hear the presentation by 2 professors, Professor Reginald Bruce, he goes by Reg, and Scott LaJoy. I'd like to tell you a little bit about these 2 outstanding faculty members and then have them present to you. Dr. Bruce is an associate professor of management in the College of Business. And Dr. LaJoy is an associate professor of health promotion and behavioral sciences in the School of Public Health and Information Sciences. I asked them to share with you the presentation they gave to Faculty Senate. So Reg and Scott, whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, I'm Scott LaJoy. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to share with you the work that we've done over the last 4 months or so. I know that Jake said he was going to be sharing some slides with you. So we'll go ahead and I will introduce you to what we did and our basic recommendations, and then Reg will show you a broader set of recommendations that we are currently exploring. But the purpose of this committee, we're a subcommittee of the broader Committee for Student Wellbeing. And our purpose as a subcommittee is to look at ways in which faculty can support student well-being. What specific recommendations and changes can we implement that will improve students' well-being, particularly during this time of pandemic? You'll see that our committee membership included a wide variety of faculty and staff, and some at the administration level, at the provost level, from both campuses, several different departments. We were particularly excited to have Colleen Martin from the Disability Resource Center and Patrick Ivy from Athletics join us to broaden out our perspective. The charge of our committee, as you'll see on the screen, is to assist faculty in supporting and promoting the well-being of our students. Okay. So we made 5 recommendations that we presented to Dr. Boehm and to Dr. Wallace-Boas. So the whole purpose of our whole main mindset was to create situations in which faculty can show grace to our students. And we were working under the time frame of faculty getting ready to start the fall semester. They were developing their syllabus, their syllabi, and starting to make changes to their class in relationship to the pandemic. So these 5 recommendations are fairly straightforward and easily implemented into changes in the syllabus right away. The first relates to attendance. And what we want to do here is loosen the requirements of attendance for students so that if students don't feel pressured to come to campus or even participate online if they're feeling unwell or if they have to care for family members who are sick. And we particularly don't want students to have to go to a doctor's office to get a note saying that they're sick. That way they don't risk getting sick by going to the doctor's office. And that we want our faculty to work closely with students to help them make up any missing work. So that policy is related to attendance. Our second primary goal relates to deadlines of assignments. And we thought that faculty should be somewhat more flexible in setting deadlines. We want to avoid, at least during the pandemic period, we want to avoid late assignment penalties within reason, and we want to be more, I guess, forgiving if they're late on a deadline. Our third goal has to do with whether or not a student can complete the semester, and we thought that faculty should be a little more willing to offer incomplete grades or encourage a compassionate withdrawal from the class. So this allows students to make the best decision for their personal well-being. Okay. If you move to the next slide, please. Our fourth goal relates to the language in the syllabus, and we have, in general, the Delphi Center has been excellent about getting out to faculty the need for clarity in the syllabus. We just want to reiterate that and state that syllabi should be very clear on their expectations for how a student can be successful, and that the learning objectives are tied very closely to any sort of assessments that are expected of the students. And we also thought that the syllabus should contain more information about where students can reach out for academic assistance and particularly behavioral or mental health assistance. Our final recommendation relates to grading policies, where we suggested that faculty be more responsive to the grading requirements throughout the semester, that they provide regular opportunities for students to understand where they stand in the course, particularly if the student is in trouble, that we use the early warning system to help students assess academic performance. And that relates back to our recommendation number 3, which allows students to make a withdrawal or drop out of the class. So those are our 5 current recommendations that we submitted. Dr. Bruce will present to you the broader set of ideas that we have and that we're continuing to work on, with the goal of faculty showing grace to our students, being more compassionate to them. Reg?
Great. Thanks, Scott. So, and the reason that you see it this way is I use a program called Mind Manager. It does mind mapping, and it doesn't readily print out to a single page that's easily readable once you get to a mind map that's any size. I'm glad to have the opportunity to share some of the work that the faculty group on student well-being has done this year. I remember it was a year ago at the July meeting of the Faculty Senate where Beth had presented some findings from a workshop that she attended on student well-being, and she had clearly been touched by some of the statistics. And as she shared those data with the faculty senators there, it hit home with me. And while we initially talked about this as being a faculty issue, it became faculty, staff, and student-centered. Staff play a big role in student well-being just as much as faculty do. And so we have other groups of this committee working on issues campus-wide to improve our student well-being. This notion of faculty showing grace, I was reminded of on Monday. I was attending a conference on online teaching, and the coordinator of academic innovation at University of Mississippi, Patricia O'Sullivan, was sharing some of the findings that she had from conducting focus groups with students from University of Mississippi during the time of the changeover from in-class to online back in the spring. And a quote from one of the students just struck home. The student turned to the provost and said, "Can you please tell the faculty to show grace?" And I just thought, wow. We have our cardinal principles, and you've heard you know what the cardinal principles are. Frankly, as a faculty member who's been here for quite a long time, I heard the cardinal principles the first time, and I thought to myself, it's a marketing ploy. It doesn't have anything to do with me. And boy, was I wrong. The more I study these cardinal principles, the more I think it really does impact what we, the roles that we play in the lives of our students. So I want to walk you through this this mind map briefly. And the mind map basically shows where we are at right now in terms of the things that we are focusing on most likely. So we're focusing on things such as, and this area on faculty as coaches is developed and sort of led by Patrick Ivy, a wonderful associate director of athletics. A great gem for this campus. But the role that faculty are playing in terms of developing positive emotions, resiliency, growth mindsets in our students. And to do that requires that we also train our faculty. Talk about this down here as a training and opportunity. That training really is for our faculty, to teach our faculty to be better coaches, to model the way for our students. So we'll be exploring that more next year, or this coming year. An area that is, you might say, is more present in the news, but it's frankly, folks, this has been an issue that's been a challenge for us since I've been since I've been alive, but creating more inclusive climates, inclusive attitudes in the classroom, not just racial, but gender, sexual, religious, just being more open. And demonstrating that cultural proficiency. Once again, this provides a great training opportunity down here. And I'm not talking about only training for students, but I'm also talking about substantial training required for faculty and staff. So we'll be exploring that more this next year. Universal, how do I get back here? Here we go. I'm trying to control Jake's computer here. In terms of the structure of the classes themselves. And some of this has to do with online teaching, but also in general, what are those universal design principles that we can embed in our classes that will lead to better comprehension, greater levels of self-regulation, and strengthening students' executive functions. And part of this also means that we frequently check in with our students. And while we talk about checking in with our students, if it's in class, face-to-face, it also requires new ways for us to check in with our students one-on-one in an online environment. And then other things that we just need to make sure that we do as faculty to turn in on grades on time throughout the semester and at the end of the semester, so we don't overly stress our students. So, okay. Here we go. A lot of this past year that you saw, the 5 recommendations that we came forward with from this year's work came from this class of policies here dealing with classroom policies. And policies, you'll see there are more that we focus on, but things such as attendance and greater flexibility, allowing for students to make choices for themselves, and accommodating our working students. Because we have a large number of students who work full-time. We have our Metropolitan College students, our UPSers, and we need to be sensitive to the fact that many of those students are coming into our classrooms with very few hours of sleep because they've been working through the night. Talked about the doctor's notes and extensions, greater flexibility in many of our policies. Rather than saying, for example, we never accept a late assignment. Well, we may say that, but then we always do accept the late assignment. So rather than say we never will accept a late assignment, under what conditions will we accept the late assignment, and make that clear to the students. So much of this is clarifying our expectations, faculty expectations of students. And then that takes us into, I can pull this down here. The 5th area that we are investigating this year, and this is an area that we simply didn't have the time to do this year clearly, but it's the design of the classes. And I've always thought this was important. I also know that I'm a psychologist. I'm not a designer, so I don't know things such as color preference of colors and walls and all that stuff. But the seating arrangement. So unfortunately we're dealing with this without having to deal with seating because of the pandemic right now for our new hybrid classes. Flexible seating even without the pandemic for those students who with disabilities, to foster collaboration, and right now to enable social distancing. Our conferencing systems within the classrooms, because I believe that what we're going to see now with this distance learning and our hybrid teaching right now is more and more hybrid classes with students who are remote learners and students who are in-class learners simultaneously working with the students, working with the faculty. So that requires different types of displays, desktop setups, microphones throughout the room, things of that nature. The learning platform that we use, are we using the best? Having our materials available asynchronously, recorded lectures, make sure that they're captioned, PowerPoint slides and readings, and the PowerPoint slides and readings being accessible as well. And this is where I got to the notion of paint color. I didn't know this, but blue is preferable for classrooms. In the College of Business, I don't know if you've been there lately, but the classrooms are probably, I don't know, a puke brown, to say something. And then acoustical softening, carpeting, fabric walls, etc. And for someone who has substantial hearing loss, I know that when I'm in rooms that are harsh and hard, it's quite difficult for me to actually hear and understand what the speaker's saying. So, Jake, you can take over control of the computer once again. That's sort of the direction that our group will be going in this next year. And I just say look forward to seeing more recommendations coming from our working group. Are there any questions, comments?
Sure. So I did have a brief question. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for your presentation and for the work that this committee has been doing. I'm really encouraged by everything that you've shared. I was curious as I was looking, and I might have just interpreted incorrectly, but looking at the committee roster, I'm curious how we'll be making more space for students at the table moving forward in this work. How we're going to bring in our immunocompromised students, our international students, our UPS students. Making multiple seats at the table for this student-centered work. It's so hard for one student or no student to be able to accurately represent the very diverse realities of student experience. So I was just curious if you could clarify kind of what the plan is there for bringing more students into the fold and making this a more inclusive work.
Yeah, so Reg, I'll take a shot at that. It's a great question, and we are one of several committees that are under the umbrella of improving student well-being. Our specific task is to focus on talking to faculty about what they can do. But there are other groups that are more student-focused and have students engaged in the planning process. So the student voice is certainly well represented.
Although I'm gonna give you an alternative perspective here. And Scott, we need to make sure we have more students. We have students on our subcommittee. I found myself this semester, or actually this whole year, both in the fall and in the spring, turning to my students consistently over the time, asking them questions, whether they be my international students, my UPSers, people in my evening class who are working full time, not at UPS, about ways that we can better issues that they have and what are faculty doing that can help or hinder. And a lot of what I learned from them I brought to our meetings.
Right.
And like being said, it should be easier. Should be a lot easier to make sure that we also had students sitting around as we talked about this. So Sabrina, that's a great suggestion. And
thank you.
I want to make sure that we will work with you in trying to identify students that can sit on all our subcommittees.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that and happy to help.
Yeah.
Great. So Krista, that's an action item for us.
Absolutely. I've got it down. Thank you.
I don't know if there are other questions, but I just want to thank Reg and Scott again. Thank you so very much for doing this. FYI for all of you, as you heard, Beth charged several teams. We are saying, as the chief academic officer, to say, how do we look after student well-being? What do we do? And please, as a board, know that this is not a diminishment of the standards we set or what we do. This is reality of how do we function in a time of a pandemic, given the realities of what our students are facing. And which is why it was very important that faculty spoke to faculty and listened to students, but ultimately that they are saying these are standards that we believe will prepare our students for success, as I like to say, now, next, and beyond. Randy, I see that you have a question or comment.
I do, and thank you, Sabrina. By the way, I had the same initial impression, so it was getting the feedback was really good. This is maybe a form over substance thing, but I found it a little bit odd when I read this originally that the language that talked about identifying resources for academic assistance and mental health is in the same grace segment on how we treat our syllabus. Now, it may have been put there because we want to have put it in a written document, but it almost to me is a graceful move by itself, consistent with our cardinal caring community, that it would have its own bullet point that on an ongoing basis, they would identify these resources to our students, because I know the university is rich in that area and they're rich with people that want to help our students. So I would just say if this is going to be published anywhere or going to be sent anywhere, it just looked a little odd to be included with something that's more like mechanical, a syllabus. And it's really an important point that there are a lot of resources, not just from a wellness, but academically our students can count on. So that was my add.
Excellent feedback. Thank you.
And Randy, you're right about that. It was there for purposes of making sure it's in the syllabus, but it needs its own point. On the other hand, we also need to realize that students oftentimes have their syllabus in their hands, and so they need to know that in every syllabus that they have, if they're at a time of high stress and panic and criticality, that they can actually turn to this piece of paper and find something. This, just as when they have their student ID card, their cardinal card, that on the back of that is a short list of information, phone numbers that they can turn to in their time of need.
I think it'll also force faculty to become aware of what all these resources are and how to get students in touch with them. So it's multi-purposed. Yeah.
John, I love how all of my board members are using the little raise your hand on this. So that's what we are trying to do in these as well. John Chilton?
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of more comments than questions. As I received the application of the principals presented, I would imagine they would apply differently during the pandemic versus other times. And secondarily, there needs to be some consistency among the faculty in the application principles. So those need to be considered as well.
Absolutely. Reg or Scott, anything else you want to add to that? In there, I think both points are absolutely on point. One is responding to what is happening right now, a moment that none of us has lived through, and then more enduring principles. And in fact, this effort by this subcommittee, as well as all others, is actually to make sure that there's more consistency so that the students know what to expect when they come to the University of Louisville. Beth, anything you want to add?
I would also say that this committee started before the pandemic. So as Reg pointed out, I came back in July and talked to the Faculty Senate about ideas that I had gotten at the APLU's summer meeting for provosts about student well-being. And it's not just about times of pandemic. Students are stressed in ways that probably I was not stressed as a student. And so there are all kinds of anxieties that our students have and mental health issues that our students have that are new for faculty to deal with. And the pandemic just put a big spotlight on all of those concerns. But this committee had already started beforehand. And I'll be honest, we had a lot of those proposals before March, and they just got more important in March. And so I think that it's not that it's just for this time. Now there'll be so you all remember that we talked about the pass-fail policy. Well, that was because of a crisis in the middle of the semester. We're not extending that anymore because students now know what they're getting into, we hope, when they sign up for classes in the summer and the fall. So I think that it's that we want to be, my goal in doing this, and Krista joined me and we co-chaired this committee. And when somebody said, how do we know you're going to take it seriously? I said, you have the chair of the Faculty Senate and the provost co-chairing this committee. If that's not a signal that we take it seriously, I don't know what is. And so we did it together because we thought that a lot of these things, it's a way of changing behavior of faculty, and that's where it starts. And so it's a faculty senate committee that I'm helping to co-chair, and we brought in experts from other areas to help us learn things. But it's really to change faculty behavior, or to make us each behave in our best ways possible. Maybe that's the better way to put it.
It's fair. Again, thank you so much. The next presentation I'd like you to, thank you, to hear from is from an update on UofL Health. When we make these plans and think about the year, last year, when we set our goals, about this time last year, we really didn't know that we would end up acquiring the Kentucky One assets that are based in Louisville. And we are so thankful we did. Clearly, just that action protected our university from a direct negative impact financially of over $60 million a year, just those activities. And the indirect impact, we don't even know how to say. What would it have done to our School of Medicine? What would it have done to accreditation, R1? What would it have done for our faculty? You know, it's a financial exigency. How do we bear a financial impact like that? But I have to say that that group, including Dr. Jason Smith, I'm going to introduce him in a minute, didn't just say, all right, we're done now that we've acquired it. Then we have the pandemic. And think about the impact on patient lives and on our community. It's been remarkable. I am so glad that Tom Miller, who is the CEO of UofL Health, was scheduled to have vacation this week. And we agreed that it was incredibly important that he do that. So in his stead here today is our incredible Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jason Smith. He is an Associate Professor of General Surgery, Director of the General Surgery Division, and the Dr. Hiram C. Polk Jr. and Mrs. Lily Banerjee Chair in Surgery in the School of Medicine. And Dr. Smith, Jason, I guess a trauma surgeon knows how to just do what needs to be done, because how he has steered us through the COVID pandemic is incredible. So, excuse me, Jason, take it away.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bendapudi, for all the kind words, and thank you for the moments to sit here and talk a little bit about UofL Health. The foresight of the board and the community to allow us to come together. We couldn't have known that coronavirus was going to hit, but I actually shudder to think about what this community would have been like had we not done what we had done back in November, because we have fulfilled a very and vitally important role and niche within this community that I don't think would have been fulfilled had we not been here. So thank you all very much for that opportunity. Thank you for the kind words. Jake, if you wouldn't mind putting up the quick presentation, and I'll talk through briefly kind of where we were at. So if you'll go to the first slide, to say that these are unusual times for healthcare are understating the problem. I will touch base a moment on COVID-19, but I think one of the things that we need to understand is we're dealing and trying to deal with a lot of things beyond that. First of all, the protests have intermittently affected our overall operations, particularly early on when the marches were coming down and through Broadway and some of the other areas, our ability to move patients in and around the system. They've also, we were bearing the brunt of dealing with the injuries and the chemical exposures for many of the people that were protesting at the time. So we've had to pick that amount of volume up. On top of that, obviously, we're integrating the new hospitals into a system. And unfortunately, our trauma numbers during this time, particularly University Hospital, have just been historically unprecedented. June was the largest number of traumas we've actually seen in a month since we started keeping track of this back in 2008. And that's related to violence going on in the community. But to be honest with you, it's also related to injuries related to people getting out and about, and after being, kind of isolated and sequestered, people doing and trying to do more. And so I think we've been dealing with that as an organization as well. And, that's brought on us, through the entire organization, a lot of stress on the staff. I like to remind people that, doctors, nurses, everyone who works in a hospital are people too, and they bring in all of their own understanding and biases, for better or worse, into our facility from the community. And it's how do we manage those and deal with everyone, trying to bring everyone together and mobilize them under the common kind of understanding that they have of trying to provide health care for people who come through our front doors. And we've done a yeoman's job at that. I think the organization has been fantastic. As far as COVID-19, I'll give you a quick update. You'll see that we've tested around 11,700 patients on the inpatient side of things. And we've had 745 positives. I will tell you overall, including our outpatient testing that we've been doing, we're slightly over 22,000 tests in our community as of today. And we've had around 855 positives during that time. So our overall positive rate is just under 4%. It has gone up a little bit recently over the last few weeks. That is obviously something we're keeping an eye on. It had kind of nadered down to a very low amount previously. But we are continuing to increase our volume of testing. We're getting out in the community and testing and keeping a close idea on what we're doing. I will also tell you from a PPE standpoint, the shortages that we had previously have been, for the most part, ameliorated. We've had a really good response from our supply chain. We're beginning to build up some backlog of supplies for us, which is something we needed. We've got a warehouse ability to store that now. And it is something we're keeping an eye on because we are seeing, as other areas of the country begin to have larger outbreaks, some intermittent interruption in our supply chains. But to date, nothing that has affected our overall operation. I will say overall hospital operations across the system for June were back to normal, and in fact slightly ahead of normal as we're starting to see some of the things that were put off during the pandemic to begin to kind of work its way through the system again. And then, one of the things that we're trying to do as far as preparing this is we're beginning to open up some of the areas across Jewish Hospital as well as some of the other hospitals and university to open up ICU and bed capacity, particularly just for the coronavirus patients and COVID patients that we have. We keep a lot of those beds open right now already. We've been able to deal and manage our trauma surge that we've had, as well as manage the coronavirus patients because of the increased number of beds we have across this overall system. And I think the important part for everyone to understand around COVID-19 is that this is not going away anytime soon. We're going to be dealing with this problem, even if we hopefully get a vaccine within the next 12 months, probably for the next few years. And so how we develop more long-term solutions for this beyond this intermittent, surge and monitoring things are going to be very important for our healthcare system. So we continue to look and update that moving forward as well. If you want to go ahead to the next slide, let me give you an update on Kentucky One Health integration, as that's one of the biggest things we've obviously been doing. Luckily, we are well on target for maintaining the Kentucky One Health integration into U of L Health. We've got the university mission support secured at around $51 million. And I'll be happy to say that the financials are well ahead of budget for that period of time. We've got IGT, which is increased recently because we've been able to roll in those facilities as well as the physicians in the community practice into our overall support for the academic missions. Additionally, we have been able to realize the synergies that we had talked about during our initial merger much quicker than anticipated. We were thinking that it would take us about a year to really begin to draw down on some of the overhead expenses that we saw, and we were really able to fix many of those problems very, very rapidly, even in the face of the pandemic, which has led to a good outcome for us. Our cash flow actually for the overall healthcare system has been better than expected during this period of time. We've had an increasing amounts that we've been able to bill and collect even during the time where we were on what I'll call lockdown because of the amount of coronavirus and the reduction in elective surgeries and procedures. We began to focus really on collecting our accounts receivable during that period of time. We're able to realize a much higher percentage of our overall collections. So from a cash flow perspective, we're actually doing much better than we initially anticipated. And finally, we're continuing to work really on those transitions. We've been able to bill our transition overall, our billing and collections for the entire system by July 1st. So now we really have more control over this entirety that we need to from the financial perspective. Our IT conversion is still on target. That is by far one of our biggest expenses, and we've put a lot of work and some very tight and very strong timelines in place. And our hope is, and I believe that we are well on target to be able to have by the first quarter of 2021, a fully integrated healthcare record system across our entire facilities, both inpatient and outpatient. And I will tell you as a practitioner, that's one of the first that we have actually had in that regard since I've been here from a number of years ago. I will also say that we continue to work on we're investing our capital over this time. And the big push we've had recently is working on our strategic plan for 2021 and really making sure that we've got, the overall targets of what we're trying to do outlined so that we've got a system-wide goal and a roadmap for achieving those targets. And I will touch base on that just a little bit later. On the next slide, we'll talk about our year-to-date performance. And so this is where the good news comes in. When we took over Kentucky One, the overall system had an annual operating deficit of just under just over $43 million. We had budgeted to lose about $14.9 million during that first takeover year. And I'm happy to report that we are significantly ahead of that projection. Overall, those Kentucky One facilities from November to May 31st have been positive $36 million. And as you can see, that's almost a $50 million turnaround in the first year. Additionally, if you look at overall U of L health, so what we had budgeted through the entire year to date would be to be a positive $24 million. We look to be positive about $62 million by the end of the year. And we will spend $60 million on capital, improving those overall areas throughout the system, not just at university, but at university and Jewish areas of Shelbyville, Marion Elizabeth, and many of our outpatient areas moving forward. So we've done a well this year more than anything else. So let me touch base just real quick on kind of where we're at and for the budget and strategic plan for the hospital. We've got 14 individual strategic plans encompassing things from, cancer care, trauma, hospital operations, outpatient operations, where we are going to look to try and grow our primary care practices across the network. How do we support the different facilities that we have, and how do we begin to align those facilities within our overall healthcare system? As part of that strategic plan, one of the things that we're looking for is what are the opportunities we have along this larger system to increase the amount of postgraduate training that we offer in the School of Medicine, but also how do we take a look at our medical students and where they are deployed and what they are doing? How are they interacting and evaluating their perspective from a community practice? And what can we do to kind of support their dissemination out into seeing what life is like in all areas of the community that we serve, including the urban environments that we're working in here at university, but also in the rural environments, and getting them out and about into many of the areas of practices that we have. Our overall operating budget for the next year looks to be about $1.8 billion in net revenues with about a 4.9% margin. We are on pace to put another $80 million in capital back into the overall healthcare system next year, and hoping to increase by about a 4% volume growth during that period of time. Now, that $80 million in capital that we're going to put in is, again, really spread across the entire system, looking at deployment of new devices and operating room capabilities at some facilities, working on expanding practice locations, and also looking and trying to find ways that we can kind of leverage many of those facilities and grow their overall volume. So bringing out nursing units and updating many of those areas around those care facilities. One of the strategies you have is we're looking to bring 63 new physicians in, and this is across all disciplines. This includes things like primary care, but also things like surgery, orthopedics, hem-onc, looking at some of the strategic areas that we're looking to foster. And so I think, that'll be really key for us is to begin to redevelop what would be the core of the clinical care mission to begin to support the academic and research missions that we also have here as a U of L health entity. We're again looking at trying to make sure that those academic relationships are built beyond really the downtown corridor. I think this system in particular has a lot to offer. The training opportunities at some of these other places to give students and residents that chance to see what life is like outside of the downtown corridor, because many of them don't know how important their interaction is with the small communities in and around the Commonwealth and how big of an impact that they can have on the care of patients at home until they've been exposed to that. And I think we're working on trying to do a good job in making sure that we can provide that. I'd mentioned IT previously, and I think this is one of the real foundational impacts that we are going to need and to have moving forward. Once we have this in place, we'll be able to begin to leverage much of the data that we're looking for in day-to-day operations for, as I mentioned, quality, clinical care, making sure that we're looking at population health, where we can identify groups of patients that may be underserved and where can we help provide them benefits beyond just coming to an emergency department or coming to a care facility, that we can begin to intervene in their overall health care in a more significant manner. And I think that's what we all want to be, is to be more involved in the community, to be more focused on delivering care in and around this environment and making sure that we grow strategically to support both the medical centers as well as the School of Medicine and all of the schools associated with the healthcare enterprise that we currently have at U of L Health. And so we're really trying to focus on that in the upcoming year and make sure that we are integrated to the best of our abilities within the community. So with that, I'll conclude on the next slide, is that we are really trying to make a difference. I think, one of the things that was handed to us when you gave us this phenomenal opportunity to develop U of L Health was the understanding that we want to be grounded in the community. And I think our academics is really a defining thing that we can bring to this community. It is something that we can add in all areas, and I think it's something that is very relatable and very powerful in being able to make those connections throughout the healthcare environment with our academic side of things. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you all might have regarding U of L Health.
Madam Chair, while people think about questions they may have, I just once again want to acknowledge the board's support in allowing this to do this, and Mary Nixon, you personally, because when we were trying to do this, I just want to say how thankful we are. And I also want to acknowledge, I've said this to you before, Tom Miller, Tony Ganzel, Jason Smith, all working together. We'll give you more detail. But anyway, I just wanted to quickly say that and see if there are any other questions or comments. I know that, Jason, you have a lot to do, so thank you so very much, and we appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you all very much and appreciate the time.
Thank you.
And with that, if I may, I'll get to the last part of my presentation, which is for the board's approval, the goals for this coming year. I'd like to, while Jake pulls that up, I'd like to share with you how important what we are doing in clinical care is, as well as the research. You've heard me brag quite a bit about all the medical research that is happening at the University of Louisville. So I would like to switch a little bit and tell you about the engineering work that is going on. There's so much more, but right now masks are very much focused. So I want to tell you that we have ordered for everybody at U of L these University of Louisville masks that you will all be getting. But what is unique about being at an R1 university is that our Conn Center, that's in the engineering school, the Conn Center for Renewable Energy, and the one of the startups that is part of that, which is the Advanced Energy Materials Partnership. Dr. Sunkara and his whole team, and Vasanthi Sunkara and the company are actually waiting for approval on these masks, which will be coated with nanomaterials. Right now, this mask can be used for up to a week. It doesn't have the coating yet, but usually when you have a disposable mask, you have to throw it away. But the sealant, they say, can be used for up to a week. They're waiting for approval from the National Institutes of Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. And once we have that, and the machine is here, hopefully, they will be able to produce 360 masks an hour or something like that. But with that nano coating, and again, as I said, once they get the approval, these can be washable and they will be to the standards of an N95 mask. And that's our IP coming out of the University of Louisville. So I will come back to you because what we would like to do is the idea of an N95 quality mask, which is what the physicians use, right, Dr. Gansel? Or surgeons and others, that quality for healthcare providers, hopefully we can get into the hands of everybody at UFL, certainly the faculty and staff who would be the most vulnerable, and it would be washable, I understand. So I don't know much more about the technology than that, but I hope to bring you good news. But I wanted to tell you how exciting it is to be investing in research of this caliber. So Jake, do you have the goals document pulled up? Thank you, everybody. It is difficult to figure out specific goals given this great time of uncertainty, but I did send you all a document, a written document. So this is a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to walk through very quickly. Next slide, Jake. As you know, whatever we do, we are really trying to live by these principles. And yes, I put this together, but truly this is a reflection of the values that the board said they wanted when they launched the search for the president, and what I gleaned from my conversations with Cardinals, current and alumni. So everything we do, we're trying to live up to these principles and to refer back to, are we being consistent with what we wish to be? So that's just a set of guiding principles that I wanted to remind us of. Next slide, please. As a quick review, last year I started in FY 19, so May of 18, and in July of 2019, we were able to get the board to approve our strategic plan. At the time, we said we are going to go for a 3-year strategic plan because usually universities do 10 and 20-year plans, which are wonderful, but I worried that things would change. No one could have anticipated there'd be this much change. But then we said, while things change, some fundamentals about higher education will not, in my mind. And the 3 goals, the 3 strategic areas we set were, we need to be a great place to learn for all of our students to be successful. Then we said to do that, we need to be a great place to work for our faculty and staff. If that's not the case, it's not going to translate to an incredible experience for our students. But for our faculty and staff, we must give them the resources they need to succeed. And that means we should be viewed as a great place for people to invest. And candidly, I view this as a virtuous cycle or a vicious cycle. When people invest, people like you, the time, the talent, the treasure that people give to us, it's either because you personally were impacted by the learning at this university, or you know the impact of having an incredible experience for University of Louisville, and you see that as important to the Commonwealth, the country, and beyond. So these are the 3. And from the get-go, even while I interviewed with you all, or several of you, thank you for that, I talked to you about how important it is to me that we celebrate diversity, that we foster equity, and that we strive for inclusion. And so these are the 3 goals, and then because we celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of what will make us great. So with that, we set goals. And again, a quick reminder, we used FY18 as a baseline and FY22 as a point where we will check in for the first half, because we have a 19 to 22 and 22 through 25. At the time, with the board chair and with the board members, I said I was going to set bold goals because that will challenge us more and inspire us more, and you will see some of those coming up. 19 to 20, FY20 was all about just defining our aspirations and building our capabilities, because we lack significant capabilities that we must invest in to bring us up to our peers in however you define it, ACC or elsewhere. FY21, we said would be building capabilities and then piloting a lot of small experiments. We don't know what it is. Let's test them. What are the change strategies? And then once we have that assessment, FY22, we said we would scale what works. All right, Jake, please go on. Just a reminder for Great Place to Learn, we're committed to student success, not just while they're here, but for next and beyond. It's just a mindset I have of what happens now, next, and beyond, and the whole team does. And we said we would commit to transformative, purpose-driven, and engaged learning. Next slide. So in terms of goals, how do we decide whether we are a great place to learn? How do we know? It's not for us to say, but that several things are good metrics to look at. And so some of them selected metrics here, undergraduate headcount as one example. The reason I didn't put graduate and professional is this is the, first of all, the biggest chunk, and on professional and graduate, we don't anticipate huge changes unless we can invest heavily in our faculty and our capabilities. So we set baselines. FY18 was 15,738. We increased it in 19. FY20, we increased it more significantly. And this year, candidly, the best we can hope for is to mitigate loss and maintain. And we're still, our numbers, and credit goes to Beth Boehm and Jim Begani and our enrollment function, we still look, it looks very promising, but we'll have to wait and see. And it might be that we come back and look at the target for FY22 and say, do we need to revisit that? Things that are more under our control, retention from freshman to sophomore. As you can see, I have reported these both by overall and for underrepresented minorities. That is a very important. Higher education transforms lives. So we constantly are trying to look at what is it looking like for our underrepresented minority populations. There is a gap, as you can see, but we're getting closer to bridging that gap. 4-year graduation rates, again, this is an interesting one because FY18 was 31.8% and 28.5% for underrepresented minorities. And for FY22, we set goals of 36.5 and 31.9%. I still recall last year, some of you who have experience in higher ed were saying that's actually a pretty strong goal, and I agree. But we really focused on it last year and had very significant improvements. But 1 year does not a trend make. We need to look at where our numbers are. Many of them will say that we will, to be determined, that we'll come back to you because we have August graduation for those who have taken classes in the summer. But in September, I'll come back to you with updated numbers for these. And finally, the 6-year graduation rates, again, we're showing improvements. We showed improvement overall. We fell back for URM in FY19. FY20, we'll have to come back to you. On many of these, we'll keep you posted. Overall, though, we're still moving ahead, as you all permitted us to do, to say these are the goals for 2022. We'll assess and then decide for the next 3 years. 2 things that I want to call out, selected tactics. One is to improve student access to mental health care. That is a very big priority. And I've mentioned to you before that a lot of students are able to attend college now that probably could not before because of mental health issues when we look at my generation or a generation after. And so, but there are significant stressors, and we want to do a better job. Similarly, one goal that we've all talked about is to prepare students for the world of work. No matter what they do, they need digital learning skills to make them marketable and kind of give them some armor against recessions and changing job markets, etc. And with that, this fall, we are going to be embedding digital learning micro-credentials into the Cardinal Core so that no matter what you study 4 years from now, a student who graduates will actually have a digital certification, digital learning certification. Next slide. Our second set of goals all have to do with a great place to work. And again, we said we have to be a place that's dedicated to personal growth and professional development for all of our people. And that the most important thing would be that staff, faculty, students, and definitely administrators, that we're held to a higher standard, that all of us must live out our institutional values, the cardinal principles. Next slide. The metrics for this, we talked about overall employee evaluation. And again, these are climate surveys that are done. And the baseline for FY18 was 2.98, and participation in surveys was 26%. We set bold goals relative to that to say, but that we will increase this to 4.0 and to 40%. Now, some of you might be listening to this and say, what are you talking about? 40% as a bold goal. But in terms of participation across campus, we want to see and hopefully get to that. This is not a survey we do every year. And obviously with the FY20 spring, things changed. But hopefully if we do this FY21, that we show an improvement and do significantly better. Selected Tactics launched the Employee Success Center for staff development. That is something we really need to do. And so we've secured funding, some support, external support for this from Kroger and others, and we're eager to launch this so that supervisors, employees feel supported in their quest to be their best at UFL. IT infrastructure. This is a very, very big need to improve what it's like to work at UFL. As I've shared with you, in several areas, we have pre-Y2K infrastructure. So this will be an area that we will be emphasizing and filling important roles. We've had tremendous individuals in several important roles, and we are doing searches, and these are things that we would need to address as well. Next slide. Jake? Okay, thank you. The third one, as we said, is that the University of Louisville would be a great place to invest because of its demonstrated impact on economic, social, and cultural health. Could we go to the next slide? The metrics here that we talked about are annual philanthropy in millions, number of unique donors that would give. The idea is that it's not just the total amount, but how many people are we able to bring back into the fold? Liquidity, both in dollar amount and days of cash on hand. And you might say, why liquidity for a great place to invest? The reason for using that is that we hope to signal to our accreditors and to our alumni and to our donors that we are a stable institution and that we are being good stewards of their trust. The final metric I have here is research expenditures. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I'll spend a minute on this. This may sound like an odd metric, but this is what the NSF uses for higher education research and development expenses. And that's what it's called, research expenditures. What are we getting? This is across multiple sources. What are we getting by funding from government, federal, local, state? What are we getting from industry, nonprofit institutions? And it also includes what is the institution itself investing in research. So let me walk through these and I'll tell you how we are doing. Annual philanthropy, you can see the numbers. I do want to call out that FY19 includes the gift of the Cardiovascular Innovation Institute from JHFE to us. That's $16 million, I believe, as I provided information to you. And FY20 philanthropic gifts of $50 million to allow us to acquire the Kentucky-based assets, Louisville-based assets of Kentucky One. FY21, we have downgraded. We're trying to think that philanthropy, from everything we're hearing in the higher education sector, is probably going to take a hit. We hope not, and we'll certainly do our very best, but wanted to set realistic expectations. And then the target you see was something we thought we would be able to move towards. Number of unique donors. In FY19, as I went around and introduced myself and we talked to people, and all of us as a team, people started to say, we may not be ready to make big investments, but we want to show you that we believe, and start to re-engage. That's something we hope will pick back up again. Liquidity, you can see, we have We really focused on it because coming in and as many of you know, and Dr. Burst went with us to the SACS group to talk about this, that was something that is a very real concern to us. And shout out to Dan Durbin and his whole team for helping us track and do well on that. Research expenditures. I want to point out how there's a dip in FY19 compared to FY18. The truth here is that our overall awards went up, but what happened was over $5 million of endowment spending, that is the university spending in our research through what, because of underwater accounts, that took a dip. So it shows that we are down, but over $5 million of that, it shows we're down by about 3, but over 5 million of that was because the university was not able to invest as it traditionally did. Again, we will get you FY20 numbers. We have them all in September. So pretty much everything in the September meeting, we can get you updates. Selected tactics. This is very important to us. And Dr. Smith mentioned when we acquired these assets, the $1.8 billion UFL health system now, we made a huge commitment that we would matter in the lives of those we serve, the ripple effects. So I'm very pleased to tell you that we are committing to offering urgent care services in West Louisville. There's a very dire need. We hope to do that this calendar year. We are also going to align all of our research around the grand challenges. Those grand challenges were developed in fall of 20. And you all approved them. Empowering our communities, advancing our health, and engineering the future of work. So now Dr. Gardner and his team will be aligning us as well as external partners around these grand challenges. Last year, we started the process. Michael Wade Smith, John Rees, our marketing team, we've had an extensive process of how should we launch our brand, what should we be doing. So we have a lot of information. We're eager to do a marketing presentation for you at the next board meeting and hopefully launch. Again, this is one of those things that we said has to wait because of COVID-19. We had other things that we needed to bring. Finally, we hope to implement the new budget model. You are all, as board members, asking us for more transparency and accountability across the university. How are we faring by college, by department? And this will help us to get there. Next slide, please. Celebrate diversity, foster equity, and strive for inclusion. Because all of these are not just nice to do, they're all going to make us a better place to learn and work and invest. So part of the goal here is to be responsive to the moment, but not do it just for the moment, that this has to have lasting impact. It's something we commit to now and beyond. We are getting set to have conversations and to develop and implement this year an anti-racism agenda. We're trying to do this in July and August because many faculty and staff and students are not around, did not want it to be something that's just coming in top down. But please stay tuned. We are talking about being a premier metropolitan research university that's known as the premier place for an anti-racism agenda. We are committing to implicit bias training and diversity training for all search committee members so that we improve outcomes. And we are going to prioritize the diversification of our faculty, staff, and administration through intentional goal setting and regular check-ins. Finally, we want to actually create strong metrics so that we track and report our engagements in West Louisville. This is something that Dr. Fitzpatrick and his team have been committed to for a very long time. We are going to make it part of the dashboard we present to you regularly. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to talk about my personal development goals. One thing I'm going to work on is, they're both related. One is to listen more intentionally to constituents and stakeholders and do my very best to fully hear them and to mitigate the chance of missing critical information. Secondly, I want to review my span of control and delegate more effectively. to ensure that all the goals that we set, alignment between unit goals and university goals, so that we have timely progress, completion, and follow-up on key priorities. None of what we achieved last year would be possible without my team. And I'm very, very thankful to each and every one of them. And I'm thankful to you for this opportunity to present goals that we have collectively set for this coming year. Madam Chair, I tried to speak fast in the interest of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Neely. Certainly appreciate you and your team getting aligned on this set of goals and objectives in a time of unprecedented uncertainty. I suspect that we will, given how uncertain these times are, that we'll revisit these occasionally throughout the year, and knowing that we don't have all the metrics quite yet, we'll add a little, add those as we get them, and probably do some wordsmithing along the way. But I think I'm very comfortable with them and think they've got the right mix of realism and boldness. But I would pause for a second and see what questions or input any of the other trustees would have, since you've had a chance to look at the document Neely sent you and now have the benefit of her comments as well.
Madam Chair, this is Jim Rogers. I've got a couple of questions. Neely, on the graduation rate, 4-year, 6-year, you can't capture, or maybe you can, students that transfer out, go to other schools and graduate perhaps, or kids that drop out for a year and then go back to school. You've got no way of capturing that, correct?
Neely, you're muted.
Thank you, Beth. Jim, I'm going to have Beth speak to that. I do know they can track whether they've gone to a Kentucky school, but Beth, would you please?
We don't get to count students who start here and go elsewhere and eventually finish among our group, but we do track them. I mean, so we know who starts here and doesn't get counted. We do get to count anybody who comes here as a first-time student. They can pause and come back, right? But obviously that extends their time of completion. And transfer students count for us as degree completions. So we get to count that they got a degree from U of L in our metrics, but we don't get to count them in our 6-year graduation rate. So they have to.
But if they go to another school, do you know that they graduate?
Yes, we do know that. We have a system in well, it's actually a nationwide system, but in Kentucky we pay attention to it too. And we know, for instance, if somebody, and we know who transfers to us from other institutions as well. So we know when Kentucky students graduate. All right. Good. We just don't get to count them in our graduation rates if they graduate from someplace else.
But that's still success.
Yeah, it's always success, and that's why we do care about that.
And you've shown us this in the past. I'm curious, what do we look like against our peers as far as the 4-year and 6-year graduation rate? And I know you don't have that off the top of your head. And what would you say success looks like? I mean, like 100%. What would success look like?
What would an ultimate success be? So Kentucky's right now a little over 60. So they are, and we're not 260 yet. When we work with CPE to set some of these goals, so when you see the targets in the right-hand column, they are either at the CPE goal or maybe in some cases a little bit higher than what CPE has asked us to do. We are like the number 2 in the state in terms of our completion rates. I did just actually look at these the other day, so within Kentucky, we do fairly well, and we've also made a greater improvement. In 19, 20 years ago, we were at like 30-some% completion rate in the 6 years. So we made a tremendous improvement in those 20 years, and now every percentage point is harder to get. We've gotten all the low-hanging fruit, so now every percentage point is more difficult, and the more we recruit students who are underfunded, the more it costs us to make each one of those successful. And that's okay. I mean, that's our mission. So I'm fine with that, but I think it's important to have that context. Nationally, I think it's 67% is the average, but that includes schools like Duke, where students have a 98% completion rate in 4 years because the tuition is so astonishing that parents say you finish in 4 years or there is not a fifth year. So I think that we would, to me, it would be hugely successful if eventually we could get up to 67%.
Thanks.
Or higher. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I'm just,
That, yeah.
thank you, Beth.
Can I say
Beth, what? Good, sorry.
Well, just let me add one thing. One of the biggest changes we really pushed last year and was trying to get our advisors to encourage students to take 15 hours. We have had a long-standing culture here where 12 hours was considered full-time. It is considered full-time, but if you take 12 hours every semester, you're going to take 5+ years to finish. I mean, that's just, the math. And so we really pushed last year, and there was this kind of sense, oh, our students are different because our students work more hours, and some of that is true. We have to be thoughtful of students, for instance, who are in the UPS programs who might actually take 5 years to finish because they're working a lot of hours. But for a lot of our students, 15 hours is certainly they're capable of it. And so we've been pushing that. And that's one of the things that has moved us up a little bit is that requiring, or not requiring, but urging people to take the 15 hours.
Thank you.
And Beth, we still are, when our students graduate, it's, for me, if they graduate in 5 years, but they're putting themselves through college and have no debt, we still, among public universities in Kentucky, this is a surprise to people, our students graduate with the lowest debt of any public university in Kentucky. And that is remarkable, also given the fact that we have 40% of our students who are Pell eligible.
Right.
So it is a challenge, and we are trying to do our very best to address these students through advising and through financial support, emergency funds, anything we can do to support them.
That's right.
Okay, anybody else have any questions about the goals and objectives for Neely or anybody on her team?
Madam Chair, there's a question from Raymond Burse. Mr. Burse says, what data supports that statement? I'm assuming it's about the college debt. Is that right?
Yes.
Beth, you are muted.
I'm sorry, the data supporting that we are the lowest in Kentucky of the publics is on the CPE website. They collect that data for all state institutions.
Any other questions?
I just had a comment, Neely, looking at your proposed goals, and I certainly appreciate the goals with regard to creating an anti-racism campus agenda. I think it's really important that speaks to your goals about being more intentional about listening to the constituents of the university, because this is something that several constituency groups have voiced concern about feeling included and desired and involved in the campus. And I think that anything that you can do to help improve that's going to be a good thing. So town halls or other colloquia that you can set up to help improve that, I think will be beneficial for the university community as a whole as well. So thanks for that part too.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. And actually, I do want to give credit to Dr. Faye Jones, who heads up our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And she is very focused on this. She reports now directly to me, as you know. And so thank you for that. And we will continue to do the work.
Okay, are there any other questions? Could I have a motion to approve the president's 2021 goals as presented?
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Abstention. Motion carries. Okay, next up is me, the report of the chair. And I only have one item of business today, and that is the president's evaluation. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I will repeat some things that have already been said, but I want to be sure that they get captured in Dr. Bendaputi's performance appraisal. Just as a reminder, every year, the Board of Trustees reviews the performance of the president for the previous academic year generally at our annual meeting. So today we'll share the results of our review for what the 2019-2020 academic year, which, as we all know, has been a very, very unusual year. Just as another reminder, Neely joined us May 15th, 2008. So this is the second evaluation for Dr. Bendaputi, and I am pleased to say that it is as glowing as the first one. We knew, and Neely knew, she was taking on a pretty tough assignment when she joined us, and despite the challenge the university was facing, you might remember Neely's comment that U of L has good bones. And so she jumped in, made her mark quickly, got high marks for the level of engagement with the community and the visibility across the Commonwealth, and for addressing the challenges head on. And I think, quite frankly, that resulted in renewed confidence in our university. She listened, she learned, she's building out her team, as we've talked about, and with them has developed a comprehensive strategic plan to guide her next few years as president. And of course, right in the middle of all of this, the world changed. And it certainly hasn't been the year that we anticipated a mere 12 months ago. None of us could have predicted the challenges, some say opportunities, both incremental and monumental, that she and her team have faced on top of what they were already addressing. First, of course, dealing with the threat to our healthcare enterprise by the potential closure of Jewish Hospital and the uncertainty surrounding the other Kentucky One assets. Thankfully, this board, on the advice of Neely and her team, took that on with a significant turnaround effort ahead of them. But because of the important role those facilities play in both the life of this university and the life of the city of Louisville and the Commonwealth, glad it happened. And as Jason said, can't imagine what it would be like if we had not moved forward with it. And then on top of that, the coronavirus pandemic that not only negatively impacted our larger healthcare enterprise, but also impacted and continues to impact the entire system, given the major adjustments and uncertainty students, faculty, and staff have all had to deal with. I think through this unprecedented challenge, U of L has been able to secure its financial position through some pretty difficult decisions that were made through, I think, a distinctly ethical lens. As you all know, Neely and her team were guided by the idea that those making more money should take a larger cut than those at the lower end of the pay scale, who should, try to have their pay protected as much as possible. And through a mix of strategies and relying on the additional support that we got from the state and federal CARES Act, the team's been able to come through that pretty well so far. And then thirdly, on top of all of that, several tragic local and national events that have taken place that have resulted in demands for racial justice like we have not seen for decades, which I think is reprioritizing all of our attention around an issue that, we all care about and have cared about, but can do a better job of ensuring it stays front and center in our commitments, our conversations, and our actions. So I will go into more specifics, but in summary, would state that in the board's opinion, Neely has not only been able to galvanize her team to continue to move their original agenda forward, but also managed to take on all this unprecedented disruption with the same energy, tenacity, positivity, and commitment to shared governance that Neely brings to everything she touches. So let me take a minute just to remind everyone about the evaluation process itself. We have a survey that is administered by the university's Office of Academic Planning and Accountability on behalf of the board's Governance, Trusteeship, and Nominating Committee. And I do want to take a moment and thank Benita Black, our Governance Committee Chair, and Drs. Robert Goldstein and Katie Parton from the Office of Academic Planning and Accountability for their support in this process. The survey instrument was sent to the Board of Trustees in mid-May. Board of Trustees individually returned it to Dr. Parton and Dr. Goldstein. They delivered the results to me in early June. President also submitted her self-evaluation to me in June. And then I have since shared both the board's evaluation and Neely's self-evaluation with the trustees and had an individual call with each trustee to review the results and to get any further input they wish to share. So I have attempted to sum all of that up, but it will take a minute. The feedback from the trustees has been incredibly consistent, both in terms of the leadership skills that Neely demonstrates and the achievement of this past academic year. The towering strengths, in our opinion, in terms of her leadership continue to be, just her natural ability and commitment to engaging with constituents, students, faculty, parents, business leaders, government leaders. She makes herself incredibly available. She's always high energy, authentic, and inspires hope and confidence in those she interacts with. She tackles tough problems with a can-do attitude, but is also very deliberate about being inclusive and committed to diverse opinions and shared governance. She's demonstrated she can assemble a talented team and give them the space to do their best work. And she has proven to be the ultimate multitasker and has demonstrated that she can manage both the day-to-day things that come her way and then big initiatives that come along without letting anything suffer. Except maybe herself. She obviously loves what she does and has a huge capacity for work, but as trustees, one consistent area of coaching we have for her is for her to pace herself, to continue to build a team she can rely on that'll meet the high standards she holds herself to. And one very specific year-over-year improvement we want to see from our president in the 2021 academic year is for her to take a vacation. So, Neely, I don't know where you're going to go, but you're going to go somewhere. So let's talk about just highlights of achievements in addition to the leadership skills. I'll start with academics, which is our #1 priority. We're heading into the fall, holding our own on enrollment and hoping to be up slightly while many universities are seeing significant enrollment declines. I hope that doesn't jinx us. We continue to see improvement on student retention and progress to degree. Obviously, as what we've heard today on several fronts, there's an ongoing demonstrated commitment to student learning and students, but I think highlighted this year by how quickly the faculty were able to adjust to online learning. I think we probably beat everybody in the nation in pivoting. And also, putting students first and keeping dormitories and student services open to students who needed to stay on campus when the pandemic hit. Now, knowing Neely, she always recognizes her team, so she wants to be sure I give huge credit to Beth Bang, our provost, and her team for all they've been able to accomplish in academics. Research, you hear Neely talk about research a lot. She's also she's obviously got a demonstrated commitment to advocate for innovation and research. She's had a brilliant hire in Dr. Kevin Gardner. Together, they've made marks in the university's COVID-19 response and research, leveraging both the whole U of L health enterprise and particularly the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute network. Research investments increased, and several high-profile strategic partnerships have been developed with companies like Pfizer's and others. And with all of that, continuing to move forward with the grand challenges that came out of the strategic plan, empowering our communities, advancing our health, and engineering the future of work. Intercollegiate athletics, working with the awesome Vince Tyre. They've turned, I would say U of L athletics into a best practices organization, really, I think, anchored by their commitment that our athletes are students first and foremost. You've seen our athletes, and there's been media attention that they've got the highest GPA in the ACC. They're recognized for having the most service hours. They've achieved impressive standing in the Lear Cup rankings. They've become a role model for transparency and integrity in college athletics. And Neely and Vince are both recognized by their peers for doing an exemplary job in setting the bar in the right place in the right way. In fact, Neely's now serving, I don't know if everybody knows this, on the newly constituted ACC Executive Committee, and will play a key role in determining what our fall intercollegiate athletics landscape might look like, which I know is a constantly moving target. We've talked about U of L Health, but I want to just point out again that working with Tom Miller and his team, they not only continued the turnaround that was already in place for U of L Hospital and U of L physicians, but took on the acquisition of the Kentucky One assets. As you've heard, that transition is on track and going better than any of us could have imagined, which is amazing given that the pandemic hit shortly right after the acquisition. You've seen U of L has played a leadership role in both the city and the state's dealings with the pandemic. And, Neely and Tom were relentless. I was a firsthand witness in convincing the board that this was the right thing to do for U of L and the community. Worked tirelessly to get the internal and external support to make it happen. And I'd say it's been a heroic effort on both their parts and the teams that surround them that we should all be extremely proud of. I'll touch on our external relations because I think that's, again, one of Neely's towering strengths. She works tirelessly to build constructive win-win relationships with individuals, organizations, in the community across the state and beyond that are invaluable to the university. And given her tendency to want to share credit, I'd also like to add that Michael Wade Smith, our Chief of Staff and External Affairs, has been a huge asset and contributor to the breadth and depth of the relationships that are being built. Financial stability and being a finance person, this one's near and dear to my heart. When I joined the Board of Trustees not that long ago, there were a number of financial challenges that Neely and our CFO, Dan Durbin, have both met and turned around pretty remarkably. The pandemic, of course, has brought a whole new set of challenges that had that work not been done previously, as aggressive as it was, would have been in a much weaker position when the pandemic hit. So kudos to both of them for making this a priority. We're not through this storm yet. Can't predict the future, but I do know, that they have gone through significant efforts to sort of play out all sorts of potential scenarios that could unfold and have multiple mitigation plans in place for us to turn to should we need them. You've heard from Neely her goals for the 2021 academic year that she's setting for her and her team and how they align with the longer term strategic plan. I think despite the current difficult circumstances, we are confident in her leadership and the team she's assembled around her that they will be bold and deal successfully with whatever comes their way. And at the same time, continue to make strides on the strategic plan. They obviously continue to make that a priority and intend not to let that slip. In terms of suggestions that the board has for her, besides the very specific one of taking her first vacation since she joined us, we want to see her continue to build out her team with people who share her vision, that bring their time and talent to the university's shared vision with the same level of passion, commitment, and accountability that she demonstrates. We want to see her pace herself and strategically spend her time on areas where she can make the biggest difference. We commend her and want to continue, particularly since this is going to be such a difficult year and people, you know, need a lot of communication when there's a lot going on. But to strike the right balance of timely, decisive action with the need and desire to be inclusive of diverse opinions and constituency priorities. It's oftentimes when, you know, unique and new things come your way, there's a tendency for everybody to want to act quickly, and I applaud Neely and her team for taking the time to pull teams together like she, you know, consistently does to make sure they're getting the best decisions they can make and communicating those along the way. You know, I think with respect to the goals, you know, I appreciate and applaud the team for continuing to set some pretty bold metrics when we don't know what the world, particularly next year, is going to unfold like. Lastly, and most importantly, and thank you, Ron, for your comments, to leverage this call for racial justice as an opportunity to drive step change efforts for us to go beyond diversity, equity, and inclusion, but a full-out racist agenda to ensure that U of L is always improving as a great place to learn, a great place to work, and a great place to invest for everybody. So net, you know, Neely and her team have had a great year. Lots of credit to Neely for her leadership for making that happen. I think I've summed up everything I could from all the input that I've been given, but I would want to give any trustees that want to have an opportunity to make comments to make any they might want to add. Anybody?
I'd like to say something, Madam Chair. I've enjoyed my year back at U of L on the Board of Trustees. It's been great working with Neely and also you, Madam Chair, to move it forward. And I think the difference is, as long as we're all open with each other and honest about what we're looking for, and people accept comments as Neely has in such a way, there's nothing but up for the university. So I just want to let everyone know that it has been a good year considering. Not that we don't have challenges, but we've got people in most all areas that are willing and able to accept those challenges in a positive and constructive way.
I would echo what Diane said, but the other thing, and as well as what you said, Mary, but the other thing that I think is really important, there are a few of us who are remnants of the original group that came on in 2016. And it is safe to say that attending board meetings now, first of all, we don't meet at all as often as we used to, but the work that we're working on, I think it is so much more beneficial for us, not only as a university, but also as a community. And I just think that it is a difference of night and day. And I'm just incredibly encouraged by what I'm seeing. And I'm just excited for where the university is going.
Thank you, Sandra and Diane. Anybody else?
I just want to thank the trustees who were smart enough to hire Neely. But Neely, I just want to thank you for the passion that you bring to the job every day and in all aspects. It's so evident to all of us. And I also want to thank you for the team that you're assembling. You really, truly are assembling a remarkable group of women and men that will help you succeed at the highest level. So thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to add, one of my first SGA events was actually Neely's inauguration. And I remember that being such a turning point for the university. You know, my first year at U of L, students weren't sure if we were going to be accredited. There were so many things going on. But as was said, it's the difference between night and day now, the way that students feel about the university. And on a more personal note, it has been so great to see a woman in leadership with such integrity and grace and leading our university with a lot of passion and always student focused, student centered, and that's really evident. So we really appreciate you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Anybody else? All right, well, there is no action required today. I would just like to point out that as part of our first 3-year strategic plan, we've made a commitment to do a thorough review of our performance appraisal and compensation practices to be sure that they are aligned with the university's strategic goals. And a reminder that our contract with Neely includes a review of her compensation package at the end of her first 2 years, which would have just happened, to ensure that that remains competitive given both her performance and the market for presidents of complex research universities with healthcare systems and Division I athletics, similar to the University of Louisville. We fully recognize, and we've had discussions about that these are difficult times, and it would obviously be incongruent to implement new compensation increases right now. But that said, honoring our 2018 commitment to our fabulous president and the commitment we've made in the strategic plan, we will work on an updated evaluation mechanism and a market study of relevant presidential compensation, as well as our full staff and faculty compensation, so that we have a strategy in place once we return, hopefully soon, to some greater level of financial stability. And the Board of Trustees, Governance, Trusteeship, and Nominating Committee, as well as our Human Resources Committee, will work with the university's Human Resources team to support their efforts along those lines. That concludes my remarks on the president's evaluation. Neely, do you have any comments?
Thank you. And I think that in my self-evaluation, I noted all of the leaders. I just want to make sure that they all know. So Tom Hoy and his office for helping us with everything, Tony Ganzel, it's really the team, and thank you. I just promise you, I will give this my best every single day. I really will. Thank you.
Well, we have no doubt about that.
Sabrina, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Neely. We are truly blessed, as many have said, to have somebody with your character and your leadership skills guiding us through what may be the most challenging times we'll ever see. But I think this is a real opportunity for you and your team to really show this community what this university is made of. A lot of people already know, but you guys are going to make us shine. So we have one last item of business that requires that we go into an executive session. So may I have a motion to recess to executive session to discuss personnel matters pursuant to KRS 61.8101F?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor signify aye.
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 Opposition or abstention? Motion carries. We are now in executive session. I will count on Jake, you or someone on your team to make sure we know when we are ready. And I'd ask only the trustees, our president, provost, VP for academic medical affairs, chief of staff, legal counsel, and assistant secretary remain. And we'll alert everybody when we've concluded the closed session. So continue to keep an eye on the live stream for when we resume.
we are back in open session. Mary, if you'd like to continue.
Yes, okay. May I have a motion to approve the appointment of Dr. Yi Tan as the Carol B. McFerrin Chair in Pediatric Diabetes Research?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstention? Motion carries. Thank you all. I'm so honored to be part of this group and supporting this team. Having no other business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
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 It's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.